he rapidly pursued his way, performing 2 days' journey in one, and soon came to a forest full of wild asses. Oppressed with hunger, he succeeded in securing one of them, which he roasted over a fire, lighted by sparks produced by striking the point of his spear, and kept in a blaze with dried grass and branches of trees. After regaling himself and satisfying his hunger, he loosened the bridle of Raks and allowed him to graze, and, choosing a safe place for repose during the night, and taking care to have his sword under his head, he went to sleep among the reeds of that wilderness. In a short space, a fierce lion appeared, and attacked Raks with great violence, but Raks very speedily with his teeth and heels put an end to his furious assailant. Rostam, awakened by the confusion, and seeing the dead lion before him, said to his favourite companion, "Ah, Raks, why so thoughtless grown to fight a lion thus alone? For had it been thy fate to bleed, and not thy foe, my gallant steed, how could thy master have conveyed his helm and battle-axe and blade, command and bow and barbarian, unaided to Mazandaran? Why didst thou fail to give the alarm, and save thyself from chance of harm, by neighing loudly in my ear? But though thy bold heart knows no fear, from such unwise exploits refrain, nor try a lion's strength again." Saying this, Rostam laid down to sleep, and did not awake till the morning dawned. As the sun rose, he remounted Raks, and proceeded on his journey towards Mazandaran. Second stage. After travelling rapidly for some time, he entered a desert in which no water was to be found, and the sand was so burning hot that it seemed to be instinct with fire. Both horse and rider were oppressed with the most maddening thirst. Rostam alighted, and vainly wandered about in search of relief, till almost exhausted, he put up a prayer to heaven for protection against the evils which surrounded him, engaged as he was in an enterprise for the release of Keikavus and the Persian army, then in the power of the demons. With pious earnestness he besought the Almighty to bless him in the great work, and whilst in a despairing mood he was lamenting his deplorable condition, his tongue and throat being parched with thirst, his body prostrate on the sand, under the influence of a raging sun, he saw a sheep pass by, which he hailed as the harbinger of good. Rising up, and grasping his sword in his hand, he followed the animal, and came to a fountain of water, where he devoutly returned thanks to God for the blessing which had preserved his existence, and prevented the wolves from feeding on his lifeless limbs. Refreshed by the cool water, he then looked out for something to allay his hunger, and killing a gur, he lighted a fire and roasted it, and regaled upon its savoury flesh, which he eagerly tore from the bones. When the period of rest arrived, Rostam addressed Raks, and said to him angrily, "Beware, my steed, of future strife. Again thou must not risk thy life. Encounter not with lion fell, nor demon still more terrible. But, should an enemy appear, ring loud the warning in my ear." After delivering these injunctions, Rostam laid down to sleep, leaving Raks unbridled, and at liberty to crop the herbage close by. Third stage. At midnight, a monstrous dragon serpent issued from the forest. It was 80 yards in length, and so fierce that neither elephant, nor demon, nor lion ever ventured to pass by its lair. It came forth, and seeing the champion asleep, and a horse near him, the latter was the first object of attack. But Raks retired towards his master, and neighed and beat the ground so furiously that Rostam soon awoke, looking around on every side. However, he saw nothing. The dragon had vanished, and he went to sleep again. Again the dragon burst out of the thick darkness, and again Raks was at the pillow of his master, who rose up at the alarm. But anxiously trying to penetrate the dreary gloom, he saw nothing. All was a blank, and annoyed at this apparently vexatious conduct of his horse, he spoke sharply. "Why thus again disturb my rest, when sleep had softly soothed my breast? I told thee, if thou chanced to see another dangerous enemy, to sound the alarm, but not to keep depriving me of needful sleep, when nothing meets the eye nor ear, nothing to cause a moment's fear. But if again my rest is broke, on thee shall fall the fatal stroke, and I myself will drag this load of ponderous arms along the road. Yes, I will go, a lonely man, without thee, to Mazandaran." Rostam again went to sleep, and Raks was resolved this time not to move a step from his side, for his heart was grieved and afflicted by the harsh words that had been addressed to him. The dragon again appeared, and the faithful horse almost tore up the earth with his heels to rouse his sleeping master. Rostam again awoke and sprang to his feet, and was again angry, but, fortunately, at that moment, sufficient light was providentially given for him to see the prodigious cause of alarm. Then, swift, he drew his sword, and closed in strife with that huge monster. Dreadful was the shock, and perilous to Rostam, but when Raks perceived the contest doubtful, furiously, with his keen teeth, he bit and tore away the dragon's scaly hide, whilst quickly as thought the champion severed off the ghastly head, and deluged all the plain with horrid blood. Amazed to see a form so hideous, breathless, stretched out before him, he returned thanks to the Omnipotent for his success, saying, "Upheld by thy protecting arm, what is a lion's strength, a demon's rage, or all the horrors of the burning desert, with not one drop to quench devouring thirst? Nothing, since power and might proceed from thee." Fourth stage. Rostam, having resumed the saddle, continued his journey through an enchanted territory, and in the evening came to a beautifully green spot, refreshed by flowing rivulets, where he found, to his surprise, a ready roasted deer and some bread and salt. He alighted, and sat down near the enchanted provisions, which vanished at the sound of his voice, and presently a tambourine met his eyes, and a flask of wine. Taking up the instrument, he played upon it, and chanted a ditty about his own wanderings, and the exploits which he most loved. He said that he had no pleasure in banquets, but only in the field, fighting with heroes and crocodiles in war. The song happened to reach the ears of a sorceress, who, arrayed in all the charms of beauty, suddenly approached him, and sat down by his side. The champion put up a prayer of gratitude for having been supplied with food and wine and music in the desert of Mazandaran, and not knowing that the enchantress was a demon in disguise, he placed in her hands a cup of wine in the name of God. But at the mention of the Creator, the enchanted form was converted into a black fiend. Seeing this, Rostam threw his command, and secured the demon, and, drawing his sword, at once cut the body in two. Fifth stage. From thence, proceeding onward, he approached a region destitute of light, a void of utter darkness. Neither moon nor star peeped through the gloom. No choice of path remained, and therefore, throwing loose the rein, he gave Raks the power to travel on, unguided. At length the darkness was dispersed, the earth became a scene, joyous and light and gay, covered with waving corn. There Rostam paused, and quitting his good steed among the grass, laid himself gently down, and, wearied, slept, his shield beneath his head, his sword before him. When the keeper of the forest saw the stranger and his horse, he went to Rostam, then asleep, and struck his staff violently on the ground. And having thus awakened the hero, he asked him, devil that he was, why he had allowed his horse to feed upon the green cornfield. Angry at these words, Rostam, without uttering a syllable, seized hold of the keeper by the ears and wrung them off. The mutilated wretch, gathering up his severed ears, hurried away, covered with blood, to his master, Olad, and told him of the injury he had sustained from a man like a black demon, with a tiger-skin cuirass and an iron helmet, showing at the same time the bleeding witnesses of his sufferings. Upon being informed of this outrageous proceeding, Olad, burning with wrath, summoned together his fighting men, and hastened by the directions of the keeper to the place where Rostam had been found asleep. The champion received the angry lord of the land, fully prepared on horseback, and heard him demand his name, that he might not slay a worthless antagonist, and why he had torn off the ears of his forest keeper. Rostam replied that the very sound of his name would make him shudder with horror. Olad then ordered his troops to attack Rostam, and they rushed upon him with great fury, but their leader was presently killed by the master hand, and great numbers were also scattered lifeless over the plain. The survivors running away, Rostam's next object was to follow and secure, by his command, the person of Olad, and with admirable address and ingenuity he succeeded in dismounting him and taking him alive. He then bound his hands, and said to him, "If thou wilt speak the truth unmixed with lies, unmixed with false, prevaricating words, and faithfully point out to me the caves of the white demon and his warrior chiefs, and where Keikavus is prisoned, thy reward shall be the kingdom of Mazandaran, for I myself will place thee on that throne. But if thou playest me false, thy worthless blood shall answer for the foul deception."
"Stay, be not in wrath," Olad at once replied. "Thy wish shall be fulfilled, and thou shalt know where King Keikavus is prisoned, and, beside, where the white demon reigns. Between two dark and lofty mountains, in 200 caves, immeasurably deep, his people dwell. 1,200 demons keep watch by night, and bead and singe on. Like a reed, the hills tremble whenever the white demon moves. But dangerous is the way. A stony desert lies full before thee, which the nimble deer has never passed. Then a prodigious stream, too farsang wide, obstructs thy path, whose banks are covered with a host of warrior demons guarding the passage to Mazandaran. And thou art but a single man. Canst thou overcome such fearful obstacles as these?"
At this the champion smiled. "Show but the way, and thou shalt see what one man can perform with power derived from God. Lead on with speed to royal Keikavus." With obedient haste, Olad proceeded, Rostam following fast, mounted on Raks. Neither dismal night nor joyous day they rested. On they went, until at length they reached the fatal field, where Keikavus was overcome. At midnight hour, whilst watching with attentive eye and ear, a piercing clamour echoed all around, and blazing fires were seen, and numerous lamps burnt bright on every side. Rostam inquired what this might be.
"It is Mazandaran," Olad rejoined, "and the white demon chiefs are gathered there."
Then Rostam to a tree bound his obedient guide, to keep him safe and to recruit his strength, laid down a while and soundly slept. When morning dawned, he rose, and mounting Raks, put his helmet on. The tiger skin defended his broad chest, and sallying forth, he sought the demon chief Arjang, and summoned him with such a roar that stream and mountain shook. Arjang sprang up, hearing a human voice, and from his tent indignant issued. Him and the champion met, and clutched his arms and ears, and from his body
tore off the gory head, and cast it far amidst the shuddering demons, who with fear shrunk back and fled, precipitate, lest they should likewise feel that dreadful punishment.
6th Stage. After this achievement, Rostam returned to the place where he had left Aulad, and having released him, sat down under the tree and related what he had done. He then commanded his guide to show the way to the place where Keikavus was confined, and when the champion entered the city of Mazandaran, the neighing of Raks was so loud that the sound distinctly reached the ears of the captive monarch. Kavus rejoiced, and said to his people, "I have heard the voice of Raks, and my misfortunes are at an end." But they thought he was either insane or telling them a dream. The actual appearance of Rostam, however, soon satisfied them. Gudars, and Tus, and Bahram, and Gif, and Gostaham were delighted to meet him, and the king embraced him with great warmth and affection, and heard from him with admiration the story of his wonderful progress and exploits. But Kavus and his warriors, under the influence and spells of the demons, were still blind, and he cautioned Rostam particularly to conceal Raks from the sight of the sorcerers, for if the white demon should hear of the slaughter of Arjang and the conqueror being at Mazandaran, he would immediately assemble an overpowering army of demons, and the consequences might be terrible. But thou must storm the cavern of the demons and their gigantic chief. Great need there is for sword and battle-axe, and with the aid of heaven, these miscreant sorcerers may fall victims to thy avenging might. The road is straight to thee. Reach the 7 mountains, and there thou wilt discern the various groups which guard the awful passages. Further on, within a deep and horrible recess, frowns the white demon. Conquer him, destroy that fell magician, and restore to sight thy suffering king and all his warrior train. The wise incures declare that the warm blood from the white demon's heart, dropped in the eye, removes all blindness. It is then my hope, favoured by God, that thou wilt slay the fiend, and save us from the misery we endure, the misery of darkness without end." Rostam, accordingly, after having warned his friends and companions in arms to keep on the alert, prepared for the enterprise, and guided by Aulad, hurried on till he came to the Haft Kuf, or 7 mountains. There he found numerous companies of demons, and, coming to one of the caverns, saw it crowded with the same awful beings. And now, consulting with Aulad, he was informed that the most advantageous time for attack would be when the sun became hot, for then all the demons were accustomed to go to sleep, with the exception of a very small number who were appointed to keep watch. He therefore waited till the sun rose high in the firmament, and as soon as he had bound Aulad to a tree hand and foot with the thongs of his command, drew his sword, and rushed among the prostrate demons, dismembering and slaying all that fell in his way. Dreadful was the carnage, and those who survived fled in the wildest terror from the champion's fury. 7th Stage. Rostam now hastened forward to encounter the white demon. Advancing to the cavern, he looked down, and saw a gloomy place, dismal as hell, but not one cursed, impious sorcerer was visible in that infernal depth. Awhile he stood, his falchion in his grasp, and rubbed his eyes to sharpen his dim sight, and then a mountain form, covered with hair, filling up all the space, rose into view. The monster was asleep, but presently the daring shouts of Rostam broke his rest, and brought him suddenly upon his feet, when seizing a huge millstone, forth he came, and thus accosted the intruding chief. "Art thou so tired of life, that reckless thus thou dost invade the precincts of the demons? Tell me thy name,
that I may not destroy a nameless thing. The champion, stern, replied, My name is Rostam, sent by Zal, my father, descended from the champion, Sam Sovar, to be revenged on thee, the king of Persia being now a prisoner in Mazandaran. When the accursed demon heard the name of Sam Sovar, he, like a serpent, writhed in agony of spirit, terrified at that announcement. Then, recovering strength, he forward sprang, and hurled the millstone huge against his adversary, who fell back, and disappointed the prodigious blow. Black frowned the demon, and through Rostam's heart a wild sensation ran of dire alarm. But, rousing up, his courage was revived, and wielding furiously his beaming sword, he pierced the demon's thigh, and lopped the limb. Then both together grappled, and the cavern shook with the contest. Each at times prevailed. The flesh of both was torn, and streaming blood crimsoned the earth. If I survive this day, said Rostam in his heart, in that dread strife, my life must be immortal. The white demon, with equal terror, muttered to himself, I now despair of life. Sweet life, no more shall I be welcomed at Mazandaran. And still they struggled hard. Still sweat and blood poured down at every strain. Rostam, at last, gathering fresh power, vouchsafed by favouring heaven, and bringing all his mighty strength to bear, raised up the gasping demon in his arms, and with such fury dashed him to the ground, that life no longer moved his monstrous frame. Promptly he then tore out the reeking heart, and crowds of demons simultaneous fell as part of him, and stained the earth with gore. Others, who saw the signal overthrow, trembled, and hurried from the scene of blood. Then the great victor, issuing from that cave with pious haste, took off his helm, and mail, and royal girdle, and with water washed his face and body, choosing a pure place for prayer, to praise his Maker, him who gave the victory, the eternal source of good, without whose grace and blessing what is man? With it his armour is impregnable. The champion, having finished his prayer, resumed his war habiliments, and, going to Aulad, released him from the tree, and gave into his charge the heart of the white demon. He then pursued his journey back to Keikavus at Mazandaran. On the way, Aulad solicited some reward for the services he had performed, and Rostam again promised that he should be appointed governor of the country. But first the monarch of Mazandaran, the demon king, must be subdued, cast into the yawning cavern, and his legions of foul enchanters utterly destroyed. Upon his arrival at Mazandaran, Rostam related to his sovereign all that he had accomplished, and especially that he had torn out and brought away the white demon's heart, the blood of which was destined to restore Keikavus and his warriors to sight. Rostam was not long in applying the miraculous remedy, and the moment the blood touched their eyes, the fearful blindness was perfectly cured. The champion brought the demon's heart, and squeezed the blood from every part, which, dropped upon the injured sight, made all things visible and bright. One moment broke that magic gloom, which seemed more dreadful than the tomb. The monarch immediately ascended his throne, surrounded by all his warriors, and 7 days were spent in mutual congratulations and rejoicing. On the 8th day, they all resumed the saddle, and proceeded to contemplate the destruction of the enemy. They set fire to the city, and burnt it to the ground, and committed such horrid carnage among the remaining magicians that streams of loathsome blood crimsoned all the place. Keikavus afterwards sent Farhad as an ambassador to the king of Mazandaran, suggesting to him the expediency of submission,
and representing to him the terrible fall of Arjang and of the White Demon with all his host, as a warning against resistance to the valor of Rostam. But when the king of Mazandaran heard from Farhad the purpose of his embassy, he expressed great astonishment, and replied that he himself was superior in all respects to Keikavus, that his empire was more extensive, and his warriors more numerous and brave.
"Have I not," said he, 100 war elephants, and Keikavus not one? Wherever I move, conquest marks my way. Why then should I fear the sovereign of Persia? Why should I submit to him?"
This haughty tone made a deep impression upon Farhad, who, returning quickly, told Keikavus of the proud bearing and fancied power of the ruler of Mazandaran. Rostam was immediately sent for, and so indignant was he on hearing the tidings that every hair on his body started up like a spear, and he proposed to go himself with a second dispatch. The king was too much pleased to refuse, and another letter was written, more urgent than the first, threatening the enemy to hang up his severed head on the walls of his own fort if he persisted in his contumacy and scorn of the offer made. As soon as Rostam had come within a short distance of the court of the king of Mazandaran, accounts reached his majesty of the approach of another ambassador, when a deputation of warriors was sent to receive him. Rostam, observing them, and being in the sight of the hostile army, with a view to show his strength, tore up a large tree on the road by the roots, and dexterously wielded it in his hand like a spear. Tilting onwards, he flung it down before the wondering enemy, and one of the chiefs then thought it incumbent upon him to display his own prowess. He advanced, and offered to grasp hands with Rostam. They met, but the grip of the champion was so excruciating that the sinews of his adversary cracked, and in agony he fell from his horse. Intelligence of this discomfiture was instantly conveyed to the king, who then summoned his most valiant and renowned chieftain, Kalhor, and directed him to go and punish, signally, the warrior who had thus presumed to triumph over one of his heroes. Accordingly, Kalhor appeared, and boastingly stretched out his hand, which Rostam wrung with such grinding force that the very nails dropped off, and blood started from his body. This was enough, and Kalhor hastily returned to the king, and anxiously recommended him to submit to terms, as it would be in vain to oppose such invincible strength. The king was both grieved and angry at this situation of affairs, and invited the ambassador to his presence. After inquiring respecting Keikavus and the Persian army, he said, "And thou art Rostam, clothed with mighty power, who slaughtered the White Demon, and now comest to crush the monarch of Mazandaran." "No," said the champion. "I am but his servant, and even unworthy of that noble station. My master being a warrior, the most valiant that ever graced the world since time began, nothing am I. But what doth he resemble? What is a lion, elephant, or demon? Engaged in fight, he is himself a host." The ambassador then tried to convince the king of the folly of resistance, and of his certain defeat if he continued to defy the power of Keikavus and the bravery of Rostam, but the effort was fruitless, and both sides prepared for battle. The engagement which ensued was obstinate and sanguinary, and after 7 days of hard fighting, neither army was victorious, neither defeated. Afflicted at this want of success, Keikavus grovelled in the dust, and prayed fervently to the Almighty to give him the triumph. He addressed all his warriors, one by one, and urged them to increased exertions, and on the 8th day, when the battle was renewed, prodigies of valour were performed. Rostam singled out and encountered the king of Mazandaran, and fiercely they fought together with sword and javelin, but suddenly, just as he was rushing on with overwhelming force, his adversary, by his magic art, transformed himself into a stony rock. Rostam and the Persian warriors were all amazement. The fight had been suspended for some time, when Keikavus came forward to inquire the cause, and, hearing with astonishment of the transformation, ordered his soldiers to drag the enchanted mass towards his own tent. But all the strength that could be applied was unequal to move so great a weight, till Rostam set himself to the task, and amidst the wondering army lifted up the rock and conveyed it to the appointed place. He then addressed the work of sorcery and said, "If thou dost not resume thy original shape, I will instantly break thee, flinty rock as thou now art, into atoms, and scatter thee in the dust." The magician king was alarmed by this threat, and reappeared in his own form, and then Rostam, seizing his hand, brought him to Keikavus, who, as a punishment for his wickedness and atrocity, ordered him to be slain and his body to be cut into 1,000 pieces. The wealth of the country was immediately afterwards secured, and at the recommendation of Rostam, Aulad was appointed governor of Mazandaran. After the usual thanksgivings and rejoicings on account of the victory, Keikavus and his warriors returned to Persia, where splendid honours and rewards were bestowed on every soldier for his heroic services. Rostam, having received the highest acknowledgments of his merit, took leave and returned to his father Zal at Zabolestan. Suddenly, an ardent desire arose in the heart of Keikavus to survey all the provinces and states of his empire. He wished to visit Turan and Chin and Makran and Barbar and Zira. Having commenced his royal tour of inspection, he found the king of Barbaristan in a state of rebellion, with his army prepared to dispute his authority. A severe battle was the consequence, but the refractory sovereign was soon compelled to retire, and the elders of the city came forward to sue for mercy and protection. After this triumph, Keikavus turned toward the mountain Kaf, and visited various other countries, and in his progress became the guest of the son of Zal in Zabolestan, where he stayed a month, enjoying the pleasures of the festive board and the sports of the field. The disaffection of the king of Hamavaran, in league with the king of Mesir and Sham, and the still hostile king of Badbaristan, soon, however, drew him from Nimruz, and quitting the principality of Rostam, his arms were promptly directed against his new enemy, who, in the contest which ensued, made an obstinate resistance, but was at length overpowered, and obliged to ask for quarter. After the battle, Keikavus was informed that the Shah had a daughter of great beauty, named Sudaber, possessing a form as graceful as the tall cypress, musky ringlets, and all the charms of heaven. From the description of this damsel he became enamoured, and, through the medium of a messenger, immediately offered himself to be her husband. The father did not seem to be glad at this proposal, observing to the messenger that he had but 2 things in life valuable to him, and those were his daughter and his property. One was his solace and delight, and the other his support. To be deprived of both would be death to him. Still he could not gainsay the wishes of a king of such power, and his conqueror. He then sorrowfully communicated the overture to his child, who, however, readily consented, and in the course of a week the bride was sent escorted by soldiers and accompanied by a magnificent cavalcade, consisting of 1,000 horses and mules, 1,000 camels, and numerous female attendants. When Sudabe descended from her litter, glowing with beauty, with her rich dark tresses flowing to her feet, and cheeks like the rose, Keikavus regarded her with admiration and rapture, and so impatient was he to possess that lovely treasure, that the marriage rites were performed according to the laws of the country without delay. The Shah of Hamavaran, however, was not satisfied, and he continually plotted within himself how he might contrive to regain possession of Sudabe, as well as be revenged upon the king. With this in view, he invited Keikavus to be his guest for a while, but Sudabe cautioned the king not to trust to the treachery which dictated the invitation, as she apprehended from it nothing but mischief and disaster. The warning, however, was of no avail, for Keikavus accepted the proffered hospitality of his new father-in-law. He accordingly proceeded with his bride and his most famous warriors to the city, where he was received and entertained in the most sumptuous manner, seated on a gorgeous throne, and felt infinitely exhilarated with the magnificence and the hilarity by which he was surrounded. 7 days were passed in this glorious banqueting and delight, but on the succeeding night the sound of trumpets and the war cry was heard. The intrusion of soldiers changed the face of the scene, and the king, who had just been waited on and pampered with such respect and devotion, was suddenly seized, together with his principal warriors, and carried off to a remote fortress, situated on a high mountain, where they were imprisoned and guarded by 1,000 valiant men. His tents were plundered, and all his treasure taken away. At this event his wife was inconsolable and deaf to all entreaties from her father, declaring that she preferred death to separation from her husband, upon which she was conveyed to the same dungeon, to mingle groans with the captive king. Alas, how false and fickle is the world! Friendship nor pleasure, nor the ties of blood, can check the headlong course of human passions. Treachery still laughs at kindred. Who is safe in this tumultuous sphere of strife and sorrow?